We all have buyer's remorse. That feeling that we sometimes get after making a large purchase when we question if we made the right decision. Was it worth the money we spent? Is it going to live up to the expectations we have of it, as well as a myriad other feelings of possible regret? Seller's remorse is also out there. When we sell something at great value, we often wonder if we got the best price. Was our motivation to sell really all that well-grounded? Was its cash value today actually greater than its intrinsic value in the future? And so on and so forth. Possibly the greatest case historically of buyer's remorse, at least by some politicians and pundits, was the Alaska Purchase. Called Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox by Democratic politicians and newspapers, it was approved easily by the Senate, where Republicans held 57 of 72 seats. The public was generally in favor of the deal, though roughly 80% of the population was literate at the time. As with today, it's doubtful many of them could have found Alaska on a map. The Klondike Gold Rush in 1896 in far northern Canada started to change the perception of Alaska as a useless wasteland, with the Klondike's proximity to Alaska, which had the only navigable river into the area, the Yukon. In 1899, the derision of Alaska would end forever when gold was discovered in Nome. Alaska was just across the Norton Sound from the mouth of the Yukon River. Gold strikes in other parts of Alaska, most notably in the Fairbanks area, would keep gold miners in Alaska to this very day. The first oil wells were drilled in southern Alaska as early as 1902, but an executive order by President Taft would limit oil exploration to 862-acre tract where the first commercial well was drilled for years to come. Congress raised the moratorium in 1921, but by then oil had been discovered in the Los Angeles Basin, as well as offshore in the Santa Barbara Channel. Nobody was interested in going all the way to Alaska to search for oil. Richfield Oil would sink a well in the Kenai Peninsula, also in southern Alaska, that would go on to produce 900 barrels a day. 2 years later, Unocal would discover a major natural gas field, also on the Kenai Peninsula. But the biggest producers were still 10 years in the future. By 1969, another Alaska gold rush was on, this time for black gold, when Arco and Humble Oil discovered massive oil fields near Prudhoe Bay on Alaska's North Slope. Now the rush was on to build the Alaska Pipeline and drill even more wells. It's taken 155 years, but today seller's remorse has set in. Because of sanctions and frozen assets, members of the Russian Duma are calling for their nation to take back all the territories and settlements that the Russian Empire either sold off or abandoned. These areas include Fort Ross and Environs in California, wine country, Fort Elizabeth on the island of Kauai in Hawaii, as well as the island itself. But most importantly, they threaten to invade and take back resource-rich Alaska by force. They can bluster and bluff all they want, but Russians have risked it all on the invasion of Ukraine, moving large parts of their army's Far East units west to fight that war, and they have had their combat strength greatly reduced. Even if they sent all their airborne forces for a deep strike to seize important infrastructure and bases, the U.S. Air Force only keeps its best equipment in Alaska just because of Russia. So their Ilyushin transports will be flying into a storm of F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightnings. Their SEALA capabilities are a joke to say the least. They have 4 troop transports that date to the 1980s and earlier, which are barely enough to move a single brigade at a time. The Russian Pacific Fleet's flagship, the Varyag, is currently in the Black Sea and will be stuck there until Turkey decides to let Russian naval vessels pass through the Bosporus Straits again. The massing of troop transports and screening vessels would not go unnoticed by the U.S. The Third Fleet would have ample time to sortie from its bases in California and Washington to greet them en route. Failing that, F-35s would have happy hunting on a bunch of slow, fat targets. Is it possible to get ace status by sinking ships? Well, we'll have to wait and see. On top of the Air Force, there is the Alaska National Guard that regularly trains in the hostile environments of their own state. After years of the Army disbanding units, they decided to reactivate the 11th Airborne Division, stationing its brigades at Fort Wainwright near Fairbanks and Fort Richardson near Anchorage. Adding to that is a citizenry that regularly hunts with high-powered rifles and has to protect their home against invasion by black, brown, and polar bears. It would make the pasting that the Russian army had been taking in Ukraine look like a walk in the park. To quote the governor of Alaska, Mike Dunleavy, when asked about the Russians' talk of taking Alaska by force, he said, "Good luck with that. Not if we have anything to say about it. We have hundreds of thousands of armed Alaskans and military members that will see it quite differently." Well, that's it for today. Feel free to have a go at me in the comments, and if you really like what I'm doing here, feel free to visit my Patreon so I can bring you even higher quality material. So long, stay safe, and drink one for me.